So good day everyone, I am Rhea Crispy Bunyi and I will also introduce my groupmates. Aisel Cusi, Lawrence De Chavez, and Jean Juliet Tupas. We are the group 6 and for today's video, we are going to discuss the lesson 5 which is the HACCP system, a safety assurance process. So first of all, what is HACCP? It is the acronym of Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. It is a science-based program that works through a stepwise process and to identify hazards, put in preventative measures to eliminate or reduce particular hazards in their food products, and also it helps food managers to identify and control potential problems before they happen. It ensures that safety of the PHP or potentially hazardous foods on the menu. It also answers the questions, what hazards can enter the food and where do these hazards occur? And lastly, how can we control or eliminate these hazards? So, meaning to say, ang HACCP system prioritize and control yung mga hazards or bacteria na maaaring ma-adapt or makuha ng ating mga pagkain or in the food production. And also, HACCP provides the framework to produce food safely and to prove that they were produced safely. So the first principle is about hazard analysis. This involves identifying hazards that might be introduced to food by certain food production practices or the intended uses of the product. So, this analysis identifies potential hazards and control measures. Conducting a hazard analysis during this phase, plants determine the hazards tampering food safety, also identifying the preventive measures to control these hazards. A food safety hazard is any biological, chemical, or physical agent in food with the potential to cause an adverse health effect. We collect and evaluate information on hazards identified in the raw materials, the environment, in the process or in the food, and conditions leading to their presence to decide whether or not these are significant hazards and consider any measures to control identified hazards. So, meaning, ang pagsusuri pong ito ay ginagamit ng HACCP system upang matukoy o malaman ang mga maaaring maging hazards na pwedeng kumapit sa pagkain at pwede ring magkaroon ng masamang epekto sa ating kalusugan. The second principle identifies the critical control point or CCP in the food preparation. This is a critical control point is an operation or practice, preparation step or procedures in the flow of food which will prevent, eliminate or reduce hazards to acceptable levels. Not every point identified with hazards and preventive measures will become a critical control point. A logical decision-making process is applied to determine whether or not the process is a critical control point. The logical decision-making process for determining critical control point may include factors such as whether control at this particular step is necessary for safety, or whether control at this step eliminates or reduces the likely occurrence of the hazards to an acceptable level, or whether contamination with the hazards identified could occur in excess of acceptable levels, whether subsequent steps will eliminate or acceptably reduce the hazards. So, the principle number 2 ay tungkol sa CCP or Critical Control Point. Ito ay tumutukoy sa Isang system na kayang kontrolin ng mga hazardous bacteria na maaaring kumapit sa ating pagkain. Sa ilang mga sitwasyon ay sinasabing higit sa isang CCP ang kailangan upang ma-ensure na ligtas ang ating pagkain. Ang bilang ng mga kinakailangang CCP ay depende sa proseso ng paggawa ng ating mga pagkain o food production at kaya nitong kontrolin at matiyak na ligtas ang ating pagkain.
Principle 3. Establish critical limits. Each CCP has one or more critical limits to monitor to assure that hazards are prevented, eliminated, reduced to acceptable levels, temperature, and time. Critical limit is a criterion, observable or measurable, which separates acceptability from acceptability of the food in relation to control measure at a critical control point. So, ang critical na limitasyon para sa mga hakbang sa pagkontrol sa mga CCP ay dapat natukuyin at mapatunayang scientifico upang patunayan na may kakayahang kontrolin ang mga panganib sa isang katanggap-tanggap na antas kung may mga ipinatutupad. Validated critical limits could be based on existing literature, regulations, or guidance from competent authorities, or studies conducted by food business operators or third parties. Kasama sa karaniwang ginagamit na pamantayan ay ang measurement of time, temperature, humidity, water activity and pH value, and sensory parameters tulad ng visual na anyo at textures. In some cases, higit sa isang critical na limitasyon ang kailangan upang makontrol ang isang particular na panganib. Principle 4. Establish procedures to monitor CCPs. The factors of Principle 4 is the risk of foodborne illness increases when a critical control point is not met. Monitoring is a critical part of HACCP system and provides written documentation that can be used to verify that HACCP system is working properly. Monitoring is a planned sequence of observations or measurements to assess whether a critical control point is under control and to produce an accurate record for future use verification. So, ang pagsusubaybay ay napakahalaga para sa HACCP system. Monitoring can warn the plant if there are trend towards loss of control so that it can take action to bring the process back into control before limit is exceeded. Ang empleyado na responsable para sa pamamaraan ng pagsubaybay ay dapat na malinaw na natukoy at sapat na sinanay upang magsagawa ng mga pagwawasto or what we call verification.
Principle 5. Establish the corrective action factors. After determining what's wrong, choose and apply the appropriate corrective actions. Taking immediate corrective actions is vital to the effectiveness of the food safety system. If the temperature of the barbecue pork on your steam table is not at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or 57 degrees Celsius or more or higher, check the steam table to make sure that it is working properly and will keep the food hot. At the same time, put the pork on the stove and reheat it rapidly to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And the pork should be discarded if you suspect it has been in the temperature danger zone for 4 hours or more. And also, if the temperature of the barbecue pork on your steam table is not at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or 57 degrees Celsius or higher, additional corrective actions includes having employees measure the temperature of the product more frequent intervals and stir the pork, ensure the even distribution of heat throughout the product, and record the additional steps and verify the critical limit is met using the revised system. Key points. Corrective action is a specific action taken when the results of monitoring at the critical control point indicate that the limit could not be met, loss of control. Since HACCP is preventive system to correct problems before they affect the food system, plant management has to plan in advance to correct potential deviations from established critical limits. Whenever a limit for critical control point is exceeded, the plant will need to take corrective actions immediately. The plant management has to determine the corrective action in advance and should ensure that the actions are able to bring the CCP under control. Actions taken must include proper disposition of the affected products. Principle 6. Establish procedures to verify that the HACCP system is working. Factors. The HACCP system should be reviewed and, if necessary, modified to accommodate changes in your clientele, the items on your menu, the processes used to prepare HACCP products. Key points. The HACCP plan should be validated before implementation. A review should be taken to ensure that all elements of the HACCP plan is capable of ensuring control of the significant hazards relevant to the food business. Validations could include a review scientific literature, using mathematical models, conducting validation studies, or using guidance developed by authoritative sources. After the HACCP system has been implemented, procedures should be established to verify that the HACCP plan is being followed and the hazards are effectively controlled. Any changes having a potential impact on food safety require a review of the HACCP system, and when necessary, a revalidation of the HACCP plan or verification activities include the application of methods, procedures, tests, and other evaluations. And in addition to monitoring to determine compliance with the HACCP plan, periodically and when changes occur, some examples of verification are the calibration of the corrective actions. Besides sampling of products, monitoring records review and inspections can serve to verify the HACCP system. The plant management should check that the employees are keeping accurate and timely HACCP records.
Participle 7. Establish effective record keeping that will document the HACCP or Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point system. The factors are: an effective HACCP system requires the development and maintenance of a written HACCP plan. The details of your HACCP plan will be determined by the complexity of your food production's operation. Maintaining proper HACCP records is an essential part of the HACCP system. First thing to remember regarding HACCP record keepings. Just like the type of HACCP system you need, your record need to be appropriate to the size and type of your business. Your local environmental healthcare or EHO will be able to provide additional guidance on exactly what you need to record. Regardless of the size of your business, your record must be sufficient to verify HACCP controls are in place and being maintained. How long should you keep HACCP records? There is no legal minimum requirements of how long you should keep these records. It will largely depend on what you think is appropriate for the size of your business. You may feel it necessary to keep some records for longer than others. For example, cleaning schedule for a 1 year and supplier specifications for 3 years. However long you choose to keep records, ensure they are surely disposed of when no longer needed, as they are likely to contain confidential information. HACCP procedure such as hazard analysis, CCP determination, and critical limit determination should be documented. At the same time, the record for CCP monitoring activities, deviations, and associated corrective actions modification to the HACCP should be properly kept. To establish record-keeping procedures, plant management may use the forms as stipulated in Appendix 4 to 18 of How to Implement a Food Safety Plan. So, dito, paano ba natin ipapatupad yung plano para sa pangkaligtasan na pagkain or pangkaligtasan ng mga pagkain? Next is, identify employees responsible for entering monitoring data into the records and ensure that they understand their rules and responsibilities. So, dito naman, kailangan muna nating tukuyin and i-identify bilang employees yung responsibility bago pumasok sa monitoring data. And kailangan nilang i-ensure at maintindihan yung rules and regulation bilang isang empleyado. The roles and responsibilities under HACCP or the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. The factor. The roles of the food establishment manager and supervisor is to develop, implement, and maintain the HACCP system. Food manager must continuously use and improve your HACCP system if safe food management is to be achieved. Role and functions assembling the HACCP team is the first preparatory stage within the 12 conduct steps of HACCP. The main roles and functions of HACCP team are to develop, implement, and maintain an effective HACCP system, which they need to meet legal requirements, codes of practice standard, and protects consumer from harm. HACCP is basically a framework which help you to ensure that the end of the food production or food product which is ready to eat and it is completely safe. More especially, it also helps you to try to introduce a standard and check with or which reduce risk as much as possible. So, ang rules and responsibilities ng HACCP system ay sila yung mag-help sa atin na ma-ensure na pagkatapos ng food production or pagkatapos ng isang food product ay sila yung magsasign na pwede na ba nating kainin ito? Like that? Or ito ba ay safe sa atin or sa bawat isa sa atin? So, yun po yung isa sa pinaka-main rules and responsibilities ng HACCP system. Again, we are the Group 6 discussing the HACCP system, a safety assurance process. Thank you for your listening. We hope you all get knowledge about our topic and our explanation. That's all.